As you have seen in many of my videos, Kenyan-American returnees love building mega haciendas in the village. Many of them are often exceptionally well built, especially on the outer structures. And I have visited quite a few homes, and almost every single home that I've visited has been really well done, exceptionally beautiful. And many of them, in terms of size, actually vary between about 5,000 up to 12,000 square feet. So, folks, you're looking at one of the largest haciendas east of Kisumu City that I've seen. Maybe there is something bigger out there, but I don't think I've seen anything like this in this part of town. So today we will visit the question of size. The question really is it worth building a mega home in the village? We are going to visit this question by reviewing about 10 considerations on matter size, and hopefully by the end of this video, we will agree on whether or not building a massive home in the village is worth it or not. Now, I anticipate each person is going to have their own preference. People are free to pick whatever works for them. But we are going to walk through some of the critical decisions folks need to think about before determining the size of a house. So out of the 10, I actually suspect that number 6 might shock you. So stay tuned and let's see what you need to be thinking about regarding size if you're going to build in the village. Welcome to Kisumu, folks. If you're joining us for the first time, we are filming from Kisumu County. As you can see from the background, this is right on the foothills of Nandi Hills. And I'm visiting a friend of mine who also lives in the US, a good guy who has an incredible home, as you'll see. He's still building. The roofing is about done now. I visited a few days ago. We took a few shots. And for the sake of privacy, I probably will not say much about him, but he's a really successful engineer and professor and a great family man. So that's all I will say. But we are spending time. Today is a little bit cloudy, but it feels warm enough. The weather is wonderful. So welcome back to our channel. I hope this content is interesting enough for you. If it is, I hope you subscribe. But even if you don't subscribe today, I'm glad you're still joining us and spending your time with us. So let's start by reviewing the 10 basic things folks need to think about when they are considering size. So number 1, everybody knows that when it comes to size, it comes with a price tag to it. And that also comes with attention. That is nothing really new, but we'll break it down so that we can talk about what does that really mean in terms of cost and what should you cut and what should you not. And because of attention issues, is it something you want to think about before building? The second thing, or the second consideration you want to take into account when you're talking about size is how the size of a home can impact what you are able to do outside of your house within your property. Because again, when you're thinking about the space that the home occupies in relation to the overall size of your land, it definitely means that the bigger house, the fewer things you're going to be able to do outside. So we'll break that down again in the next couple of minutes. Then the third issue to think about is how the size of your home potentially impacts your neighbor. Depending on who you are as a person, some people worry about what they do and how their actions affect their neighbors. Some people don't. My preference is I hope you think about that, because there's some critical things that may affect your neighbor in terms of the size of the house within your property. And again, we'll talk about that shortly. Number 4, when you're thinking about the size of a home, you also want to think about how the size affects what you can or cannot include inside. And obviously, the bigger it is, the more you can pack inside your house. Of course, the smaller it is, the less you can. The question is, do you really want to pack your house with stuff or not? And if you choose to do that, what should go inside of it? Number 5, the size of the house has implications for permits. Because in Kenya, you have to get permits from local authorities. Sometimes you have national folks running around, but the reality is authorities in Kenya, when it comes to construction, could not care less. The only thing they're interested in is how much money they can make out of you. And so whatever house you're going to build in terms of size, just keep in mind that it may influence the ease or the cost of the permitting process. Not because the authorities want to make sure you're doing the right thing. They could not care less. All they care about is how much bribe or how much extra money can they make out of you, depending on what you're building. So it's something to think about. Then number 6, the size of a house definitely influences the value of your property. And that goes without saying, but it is something that one may want to think about, especially if you're building a home that is much closer to a bigger city. Generally, in the village, yes, the value might be higher, but for the most part, and I would dare to say that for the most part, the value might be more on paper than in real life. So you want to think about whether issues of value matter to you in the future. And we'll break it down too in the next couple of minutes. Now, the size of the house too influences what you're able to do in terms of windows and doors and all that. And I'll explain what I mean by that in terms of what you're able to pack in and what you can't, given the size of the walls. I've seen all kinds of examples. And if you look at my friend's home, he's got a very distinct style. You see the arches around the windows. And I believe he plans on putting aluminum windows with grills inside of it. Some people do it differently. Other people just put straight aluminum without grills. And that may have implications for concerns around security. And so, especially folks who have already built secure perimeter walls with the electric fence, it might be easier to simply go straight onto aluminum windows without grills. But obviously, as you can see, he started with the grills, and actually the grills are welded on site. I just didn't get too close, but if you look at the grills, or if you get a chance to look at the grills, the guy who did it did a really good job. I was actually surprised that he just got like a local guy to do the welding, and they came out really nice. So they're still working on that, and the fabrications of the aluminum windows are still going on. I suppose in the next month or so, the windows should be up. Now, number 8, the size of the roof has implications for the cost of your roof. So besides just the materials, larger homes, of course, mean you're probably going to spend a little more than you anticipate when you get to the roofing stage. And then number 9, water. The larger the house, the more issues you have to think about, particularly in terms of drainage and plumbing and all that stuff. Then lastly, number 10, the size of the home, of course, has implications for power. How much power you're going to use and the systems required to put that in place. So let's break down these 10 points one by one. So number 1, as I said earlier, size has implications for cost and the attention it brings. In our case, for example, when we started our foundation, by estimation, we expected to use about 18 trucks for foundation stones. And I'm not even talking about a place that requires lots of excavation because of the type of soil. We were planning for about 18 trucks. And what we ended up doing, I think, using over 50 trucks instead of 18. And that had everything to do with the size of the house. So I was just shocked that right from foundation, our budget just went into pieces. And so you want to think about the cost implications in terms of unexpected expenses. No matter what estimation they give you, if you're building a big house or any house in general, expect to spend a little more than your masons have given you. And then when you think about size, I'm not talking about just the width and the length. Think about the height of the walls. In my friend's house, the walls are really high. I didn't ask for sure, but I suspect that the walls are at least 4 meters high. Really high, especially the upper ones. Typically, folks build walls at about 3 meters high. That's about average. But of course, higher walls help with climate control, because when the walls are higher, the roof is further and the home is generally cooler. So you want to think about this if you live in a hot place. So again, plan for extra wiggle room. And the challenge for you would be to find that sweet spot between getting the size that you desire versus your anticipated budget. And when it comes to issues of privacy, as I said, any large home attracts attention. So when you're building a large home and you're worried about privacy, one thing you could do is plant trees around the perimeter. That's what we've done. There are specific trees that can help with privacy to the point where you can build a big home that is barely visible from outside. So that's one way to get around it. Number two, I talked about size implications in terms of what you can do outside. Because if your house is big, it'll determine the shape of your house, where you're going to build the house within the property. And when you think about that, you're looking at the direction of the main gate versus the main door. So the size of the house will also determine whether you can actually have like outdoor kitchens, outdoor caretaker home, a house, playgrounds, gazebo, entertainment areas like pools, open lawns, guest parking areas, and more importantly, the type of trees you're going to plant in your property. So these are calculations you want to make sure you go through before you start building your foundation. Then, of course, like I said, one thing I recommend regarding this is that you want to make sure that before you start doing the foundation, go physically to your plot or your land, go with your mason and let them give you a sketch for what that house is going to look like. Because 10 feet in your head might be very different than 10 feet on the ground. As we were really shocked when they just did the outline of the house, our house looked way bigger than we expected. So before you start your foundation, have the mason just show you what space your house is going to cover based on the drawings. Number three, your size will also impact your neighbor. Size of the house will impact your neighbor. Larger homes produce a lot of water, and that water has to go somewhere. There was one case of a neighbor of ours whose water from the roof was draining all into the neighbor's land. It got to the point where the neighbor was forced to sell his land because there was just too much water flowing into his land and destroying everything. So I hope you're nice enough to consider that, because large roofs produce a lot of water and that water has to go somewhere. Even when you build underground tanks, those tanks get full and that water has to go somewhere. And in many cases, it either goes to your neighbor or it will destroy the road coming to your property. So you want to think about that too. Number four, the size of the land, of course, determines what you can do inside in terms of living room areas, the bedrooms, office space, how many guests. So what I normally say, to use a clinical term, I say, avoid nginging your house. And by nginging, I simply mean don't over-partition the house. I see lots of really big homes that look very nice from outside, and then you walk inside, they feel very small because they are over-partitioned. So you want to avoid that. And then number five, the size of your home will determine what you're going to pay when you're getting a permit. And so it's not a big deal, but there's ways to get around that. Number six, you build a bigger home in the village, of course, the value is higher. But in the village, if you're building a home that you think you'll sell, I would not recommend building a bigger home because larger homes are very hard to sell in the village. Number seven, think about the size implications for your windows. Of course, bigger homes, you got a lot more wiggle room when it comes to the number of windows and the size of the windows you're going to put in. So if you're one person who really cares for lots of windows, big windows, then you might want to go for a bigger home. That's fine. Number eight, of course, the cost of roofing will be definitely higher with a bigger home. And sometimes this might be because you will need reinforcement because of wider spans. And in some cases, you might actually need extra pillars. And as a matter of personal preference, I don't particularly care for lots of pillars in the house. So I try to avoid those. Some people don't mind, but personally, I would do anything to avoid pillars. Number nine, water. When you're thinking about your roof, make sure you have a plan for where that water is going to go. Don't let it spoil your neighbor's land or don't let it spoil the road coming to your property. And then lastly, number 10, of course, the amount of power you're going to need. With larger homes, you'll need, of course, a lot more outlets, a lot more bulbs, a lot more wiring. Just make sure each larger space has sufficient outlets. And my friend here, as you can see, has done an exceptional job. He has sockets everywhere, outlets everywhere. So it's great, but it comes at a cost. So ultimately, here are some of the 7 things I would recommend when you're worried about size. Number 1, work towards finding that sweet spot between what you desire and your budget. Focus on functionality. I see lots of dead spaces in people's houses, and you don't have to fill every space with something. Focus on functionality. The more open it is, the better. And of course, make sure to go with your mason on the ground. Before they start the foundation, check so that they can show you how big your house looks like on the ground. And then minimize pillars as best as you can. Think about relationship between the height and climate control. Hotter places probably need higher walls. And then, of course, you want to be thoughtful about if you're building a smaller house, you can still use bigger tile, brighter paint, and glass panels to create the impression of a bigger house. I hope this was informative enough, and I will see you in the next.